Hi, my name is Brian Venton from Townsville, Australia, with another My Town Media opinion piece that I've called Censoring Opinion. Last week, the Australian government pushed through the second and third readings of the highly contentious Misinformation and Disinformation Bill. The bill is now before the Australian Senate for review. Most people wouldn't be aware, but in the government's explanatory memorandum, they say, information is intended to include opinions, claims, commentary and invective. In my view, that should send a red flag to every senator reviewing this bill. It is effectively a blank cheque that could be used in the broadest possible way to prevent any person or persons from seeking to influence public debate on any topic the regulator and the minister deemed harmful to the Australian public. What is equally more disturbing with this bill is that the government, instead of establishing their own internal policing bureau that could prosecute social media users who supposedly disseminate false and deceptive information, instead they expect digital service providers who operate offshore to manage the so-called misinformation and disinformation risk to the Australian public that the government seems itself unwilling to manage themselves. You don't have to be particularly smart to understand that the bill is unenforceable in terms of forcing overseas service providers to comply. That is, if you expect those providers to manage the Australian government's perceived risk to its people. It will never happen. If the government was genuinely serious about shutting down misinformation and disinformation, they would enact laws to prosecute Australians who break the law in respect to misinformation and disinformation. As you would expect, that action poses a huge moral dilemma for our government, and they know full well, as we do, that to take that action would be electorally disastrous. Instead, they are trying to control speech by stealth, by getting those who live beyond our borders to do what the government can't or won't do themselves. Having read much of the material outlined in this proposed bill, it made me ask the question, what then constitutes opinion, claims, commentary and invective? Who adjudicates the information stream that you or I might be relying on, and who decides whether that information is reasonably verifiable as false? Who makes that call? Of course, the whole bill in many respects is a Pandora's box of what constitutes right or wrong, truth or error, fact or fiction, or the reasonable versus the unreasonable. Let me change tack here and put this out for you to consider. Whilst it is true that opinions can be subjective in nature, they are not necessarily illogical or ill-conceived. If they are well grounded in reasoned argument, a link to objective data and analysis and embedded in critical thinking, then I would argue that opinions, claims and commentary enhance the public debate. Sadly, we don't always do thinking very well, and in some respects, governments are more interested in keeping us ignorant rather than being free thinkers. It's fair to acknowledge that when an opinion or a claim or commentary or even invective for that matter is ill-informed, or when it is wedded to a narrative, or when it panders to groupthink, then I agree. It can be problematic. But that, of course, is true on either side of an argument. But there's another side to this that we don't always appreciate. We all have what I call an inbuilt moral conscience, or what could be referred to as a truth compass, that has the ability to filter out or question the bona fides of most arguments. We may not be able to articulate a contrarian point of view on any particular issue, but we often have a sense something isn't right. And when someone makes sense of something for us, we should not be deprived of on-sharing that opinion to others in our circle of influence. I would suggest that to censor public speech in any form shows an intent to censor or control people's moral conscience and wrongly dictate what is acceptable information. We all should be afforded the ability to decide what information is appropriate to our circumstance and resist any government attempt to control our thinking. Now, your opinion or perspective is as valid as mine. And though at times we both might disagree and have it wrong or right in part or in whole, if we both have a desire to do our research, then more often than not, we will get our opinions, claims, commentary and invective on the right side of good. So, to whomever is watching this opinion piece today, let me inquire of you. Under the umbrella of the proposed Misinformation and Disinformation Bill as you understand it to be, would this opinion piece constitute a breach of the proposed legislation? Would the government expect a media entity to censor this post? The answer is probably yes, because it may breach Clause 13 in respect to the definition of information, and also may breach Clause 14 in relation to the likelihood of it causing severe harm. My own MyTown Media platform would probably be shut down as well. And whilst I don't engage in any form of invective, I am actively involved in journalistic endeavour where I write opinion, claims and commentary and offer perspectives that I believe are important for people to be aware of. Under this legislation, would my site or those who share my material be likely censored as well? I would implore our senators to seriously think through the intent of this legislation and whether it is really in the best interests of the Australian people or whether there are other motivations driving the legislation. Thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this opinion piece. And remember, the things that appear are not always as they seem. See you next time. Bye.